Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm happy to see that many of you are joining. We'll, of course, wait for a few minutes or a few moments more to welcome all the rest that will still join today. My name is Peter. I'll be hosting today's session. So the title of the webinar is a bit controversial, right? We said you don't have enough meeting rooms, but you actually do. So what we were referring to is the actual number of meeting rooms. It's a crucial event, right? It's a crucial resource for your business. So it's very important how you manage those spaces, how the spaces are used, and what's the added value for your employees and for your business. That's why we said that, in the past, I don't know, 5 years, I've worked with probably more than hundreds of companies trying to help them with their workplace strategies related to meeting rooms especially. And we've really seen a consistent pattern where the number of meeting rooms does not define the successful strategy of room management as such, right? There's other elements that you need to take into account, and the meeting room audit that will allow you to fix any mismanagement is something that we'll discuss during this call today. To start with a statement, in today's workplace environment, meeting rooms are everywhere. But when we really need to find a meeting room quickly, it seems that there's none available. So this old problem is actually something that we've noticed has resurfaced recently with the changed dynamics of the workplace. It seems that the old problem has taken a new spin. And that's why it's very important to understand the level of management when it comes to the rooms and how to continuously adapt to the changing needs of your business. The crisis, the so-called workplace crisis that we see happening today, is still related to room hunting. It's still related to ghost bookings. We see many challenges that appear, that happen, that companies are faced with, but there are different reasons why these challenges are happening still in today's age, right? With the rise and continuous stay of hybrid working models, we see that, for example, companies are struggling to understand, who's where and when. And for example, when it comes to recurring bookings, where your teams might still be meeting online, and the rooms are still reserved, that's a consistent problem that we're still seeing, right? So in the past, when there was a recurring booking where the room was booked and not used, it may happen that was the case because there was no need to have the meeting space and the room was not automatically released. Well, today it happens that the meeting still happens. It just happens in a virtual environment. And that should mean that the room would need to get automatically released for you to be able to efficiently manage your meeting rooms. So that's just one aspect of the crisis that we're seeing today, and others that are also happening, but I've just pointed a few just to set the scene of what we're seeing in today's workplaces. If we talk about the topic of finding available meeting rooms, that's still a very much relevant topic today. We still see this happening in many workplaces worldwide. So if we take a very simple, practical example, that if your employees are struggling to find an available room, and that's for ad hoc meetings especially, that they could be spending somewhere at around 15 minutes per day just trying to search for available rooms. If you take an average company of 100 employees, that's like 24 hours wasted in a day. And I don't even want to discuss the number of hours wasted in a year. So it has a huge impact on, lost productivity, but also has an impact on, utility waste, where you have empty rooms with lights, air conditioning, and all sorts of equipment inside burning energy and money. And let's not even talk about the space costs that you have, because meeting rooms overall are quite an expensive asset that you need to make sure is properly used, right? If we go to the topic of meeting room audits, this would be one very practical and as well very simple to understand and use concept that you could run for your workplace. So first, you would start with the question: Hey, is your meeting room usage efficient? If you believe that the answer is yes, then our response would be keep optimizing because there's always small improvements that you could do. If the answer is no, then of course you need to go and dive deeper. My opinion is that the meeting room or effective meeting room management is like an onion. You need to peel off all the layers to really come to the actual reason and strategies and uncover, different reasons why your meeting rooms are inefficiently used and what you could do to improve that. So one area that you could explore is the area of, hey, a room is booked but not used. Does that happen at our organization? Do we have rooms booked in our Outlook, Google Calendar, but yet when you go around physically in the office space, you see that those spaces are empty? That's an area that you need to quickly address because having rooms booked, not having them available in the calendar, but then the actual physical space is empty. That's a big concern, right? So here, we and I really recommend you to implement an auto release system, which means that the room would automatically get released after a certain period of time when it's not used or not confirmed in the system. So that would allow you to automatically release and resolve the, let's say, ghost meeting phenomena. Um, are employees struggling to find available rooms? We've touched base on the time productivity element. So if this is a struggle, and here I will recommend you to check with different departments, different employees, try to check with all of those that come in from remote work occasionally to the office. You need to look at this from all different angles and levels, right? If you still have employees struggling to find available rooms, then of course you need to upgrade to a smart booking system. You need to have a system that allows you to check whether, which rooms are available on which floor and which of those rooms are available for instant booking, for example, right? You need to have remote access to your meeting rooms and the reservations so that anyone on the go, even if this is an occasional transactional visitor to your offices, like a remote employee, has the option to check the availability of the spaces and make a reservation on the go. So there's various ways here on how you could do that, but it's an important element that I definitely recommend you to address. Then the topic of smaller groups booking large spaces. So this again is an important topic. If you have teams of 2, 3 sitting inside a large boardroom that could, occupy 15, 20 people, that's typically a problem. So here, of course, you need to set room size guidelines, but it also makes sense for you to evaluate things like, hey, do we, for the large boardroom, want to set up delegated user permissions, which means that all our reservations would go through an approval step? That's something that, typically is something that you would explore, especially for larger spaces that are also client-facing rooms that are dedicated for those most important meetings where you have suppliers, clients, and others visiting your site and your offices. And then one of the last elements is energy wasted in unused spaces. So this is also an important element because it drives your operational costs up, and something that certainly needs to get explored. So this, in a way, is a very simple, very straightforward way on how you can quickly audit your rooms today, simply to understand where you are standing right now. Of course, if you've checked off 2 or more of these issues, then here it's time to optimize and really see what you could do to resolve those, because it's not only annoying if you're not able to find an available room. As I said, it's also costing you real money and draining your productivity as such. So here now, let's look at a practical example of I've named this company X, right? So company X has variety of spaces set up in their Office 365 Admin Center, which means that they have the spaces bookable in their Outlook calendar. These spaces are of different sizes, set for different purposes, and would include a Teams room, many Teams rooms, office pods, large boardrooms, client-facing rooms, smaller rooms for internal meetings, and so on. Then, despite having all of these spaces, they continuously face challenges understanding how are the spaces used, whether they're actually meeting the actual needs of their staff. They also don't know what impact this has on their business overall, because of course, if you don't know what the utilization rates are, whether everyone has equal access to the rooms, whether the access to the rooms is properly distributed, if everyone understands how the digital tools are used to be able to make the reservations, and of course, if everyone is using or not using the same digital tools, then this is a problem, right? And then they're also saying that they have teams complaining that they cannot find the right size rooms. So, for example, a team of 8 would then squeeze inside a smaller room, while a team of 3 or 2 would be sitting in a large boardroom, right? That's again a challenge that needs to be addressed. So several challenges here, and the way how we typically audit this and the way how we address challenges like this and draft more clearer and practical workplace management strategies is we go through a more comprehensive audit that contains at least the 6 elements that are described here. So the first element would be the element of people, spaces, and technology. So here, you really need to assess how these elements interact. Are the meeting spaces and tools aligned with the user's needs? This is a very open question, but if you would uncover this, you would find out that you have different people working at the organization, as every company does, right? You have different spaces that your employees can use, and you have a certain set of technologies that are available perhaps inside, outside of the room as physical hardware, and of course, software solutions that allow you to book out those spaces. So how does all of this interact? That's a really important question, because we've seen countless of times cases where employees simply didn't know how to book a room in Outlook, or they knew how to book a room in Outlook, but they had no idea how to use the scheduling assistant. So they were actually booking a room that was already booked. So they wanted to go and quickly book a meeting room. They simply found a room without even checking if the room is available, send the meeting invite. During the time when they were already going to the space, they got the automatic decline message back, but they didn't see it. So then double booking happened, right? So there's many reasons why challenges like this happen, but it's really important to assess the connectivity between people, spaces, and technology. Then the other important element is the occupancy trends, right? This is not new, but it's more of a it gained importance over the past, let's say, few years, because typically offices are the most busy on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, right? Which means that you might have different problems on a Tuesday than what you might experience on a Friday. And that also drives user behavior, right? Because if on a Friday the office attendance or occupancy is low, then typically means that you could simply walk into any room, use it without even making a reservation, and no one will have any challenges related to that, right? While on a Tuesday, where the office is completely full and packed, and you have clients coming over as well, then that requires a different level of, room management, reservation management, buffer times, how to prep rooms, how to make sure that you have an ideal workflow for busy peak days, and how things work on a low occupancy day as well. Then digital tools. Digital tools, of course, we all use them. We all know we all might have different tools, but really here it's important to understand, and do regular reviews to understand whether everything is properly configured, effectively used, whether staff is trained and knows how to use them. I've seen many times situations where For example, I visited some offices. We went to a meeting room, and the person didn't know how to use the video conferencing equipment because of the, I don't know, changed software update, changed hardware, because no one prepped the room in advance, and there was no time to do that. There's many reasons why that might happen, but the real digital tools, if those are not used effectively, then that defeats the purpose. So this really needs to be evaluated. The utilization visibility is also important. So this is different to the occupancy trends, because the utilization visibility would give you a view on how your rooms are actually being utilized. So, for example, it would give you a view on the most popular room. It would give you a view on, for example, you could pick any room and see the utilization rates for that room during a specific time period. It would allow you to say, okay, I have different locations. Maybe the behavior and the challenges are different location by location, because I'm an international company. So we have locations in Europe and the US and also in Asia, right? So I'm seeing complaints in the US and I'm not seeing the same in Europe. What's happening? So data is really important, so that it allows you to track what's actually going on, and have arguments that are backed by data. So you're not just working based on assumptions. The utilization rates would also give you then the comparison and the view between the occupancy trends. So for example, if you're looking at peak usage times, you could also compare that then to the utilization trends and see how those are different compared to a Friday, right? So you're looking at, hey, what's going on in my office? How many employees do I have there on average, let's say? And what's going on in the shared spaces that I need to manage? So inside the meeting rooms, do I have I don't know, do I have rooms booked and not used? Who's the offender? Which team has the most challenges managing that? Can I prevent that from happening? And how the utilization rates impact the, let's say, performance of my meeting rooms? That's something you definitely need to assess. Then the room types and distribution is also very important, because if we go back to the example that I've shared of the company X, they have different room types, like most companies have, right? We see a huge increase of smaller spaces that you can use for, podcasts, for video calls, where you're talking to your remote team and there's a single pod space that you go into and so on, right? So the distribution of these spaces is very important, because each of these space has a specific intention, right? That needs to be value driven. So, for example, if you know that a number of your employees needs to work in real time with a remote team, and that they will often need office pods or single person pods to be able to do that, so that you maintain the let's say the noise levels and the collaboration levels in your offices for other purposes, then that will really be an important item for you. And in the example of this company X, what actually happened is that, the design of the rooms, the number of meeting rooms, the type of the rooms, this was all done maybe 2-3 years back, when their situation was very much different. And the person who was designing and working with the external design firm that did that for the company already left the company. So no one had a clear picture and a clear idea of what were the reasons back then that they decided on X amount of spaces, on X amount of rooms, and why they've went into different room setups and how they've aligned that with their business needs. So that's one item that needs to be addressed, right? If you have a number of meeting spaces, you need to make sure that you know what's the purpose behind those spaces, what's the value for your users, and how you plan to allocate that, so that, let's say, your user base, your employees, have a fair, use of the spaces and know how to use them properly, right? Then the last item of, let's say, the standard meeting room audit would be the feedback loop. So the feedback loop is really important, because what typically happens is companies would move into a new office space. That event itself would trigger a complete revamp of all the shared spaces, including meeting rooms. And of course, it would include, a structured design, strategy, and everything that comes along with such activities, right? But what we don't see happening enough is that companies are not quarterly auditing their spaces because as business evolves, as headcount increases, as the needs of the business increases or changes, as I don't know, for example, the sales team has more and more calls compared to what they had before, and marketing team starts to work with an external vendor that is remote, and all sorts of things are happening that might increase or decrease the level of video calls, meetings, and all sorts of other activities that are happening in your shared spaces, then that continuously needs to be evaluated, right? Because meeting spaces as such are, I would even call it a live organism that really needs to breathe with your company and needs to be evaluated and adapted at all times, ideally on a quarterly basis. So no matter if you're not moving for the next 5 years, if you're not changing your spaces for the next 5 years, if nothing is planned, you still need to continuously evaluate the use of your spaces, the utilization rates, the occupancy trends, whether new employees have access to the same digital tools, whether they were trained in the same way as the rest of the employees, and how, for example, in the hybrid working model, how do, I don't know, let's say occasional transactional visitors work with those that are where their office is kind of their home, where they are placed in the office at all times. So how do they interact between each other when it comes to the use of the spaces? This really, really requires a consistent feedback loop that you need to have aligned together with your IT, HR, office management as such, and of course your end users. So we recommend surveys, we recommend gathering and reviewing feedback on a quarterly basis. So those are, let's say, some of the elements, some of the more important elements that we would typically want you to conduct if you really want to go and do a meeting room audit. That's recommended. Just want to check chat for a very quick, okay, I see something is happening. Okay, good. So, of course, as part of the webinar, for those of you that attended, if you're ready to take things to the next level, there's a possibility of you booking a one-on-one consultation call to get some personalized insights on how you can optimize your meeting room spaces. There's a limited number of companies that we're accepting at this point, and there's a possibility for you to sign up in the next 48 hours by emailing Meeting Room Audit 2025 to the email address mentioned on the slide with your company details and reasons why you believe an audit is necessary, right? So typically what we would do is we would go through the 6 items that we were mentioning, and we would evaluate that together with you so that we ensure that you're properly aligned with what you are looking to achieve related to the management of your meeting rooms. So if you want to take this opportunity, I really encourage you to do so. It's really a valuable experience. And as I said, we've done this a number of times, so we really are speaking from experience when we are sharing the content today on this webinar. Good. To finalize, and before we go to the Q&A section, the quick wins for 2025, 4 items that I've handpicked that I really believe are important if you're looking to see whether you can do some very quick adjustments, some really, really quick tweaks to the way how you're managing your meeting rooms today. One would be time blocking. So, calendars like Outlook or Google, they would by default allow you to do 60-minute time block for your meetings. This might be a very unproductive way of managing your meetings as such. Why? Because as we are setting a defined time, like for example, what we've did for today's webinar, then typically that's the time that you will use for a certain activity, right? So I really encourage you to start with smart time blocks to encourage your users to also think about the amount of time that they will need for a certain meeting, right? And also in relation to this, also think about ways on how you can, in a very smart way, optimize the use of your spaces, especially if your office is really busy and you really have the need to make sure your rooms are really used all the time in a very efficient way. If the room is booked for an hour and your meeting is finished in half an hour, make sure that that is reflected on your scheduling software that you're using for your meeting rooms, right? There's many different ways on how you can solve that, but it's really important that, a reservation, when you do a room reservation, that only indicates the time during which you plan to use a space. It doesn't reflect the real-time usage of the space. So having that real-time usage, even if, for example, you would use a meeting room scheduler in front of the room, that scheduler, that tablet device should allow you to release the rooms earlier than planned by shortening the duration of the meeting and making the room available again for the rest of your employees, and they could use that for a quick call, quick sync with their team. That really helps to optimize the utilization rates of your meeting rooms. Okay. So switching to 25 or 15-minute meetings also creates buffer times so that meetings are not running over, because we all know that's often a problem. Then second item for, your quick win for 2025 is the option of auto releasing rooms. That, I believe, is almost as an essential item for you to evaluate. So if, for example, I would book a room for tomorrow at 3 p.m., and I would book a room with my colleague, Jenny, for example. So imagine I get sick and I don't show up. The room reservation still stays in the calendar and no one else is able to use it for an hour just because I've booked it, because I thought I will work with Jenny on a project, right? Of course, because I'm sick and because I'm away, I don't remember to remove my reservation from the calendar. So this automatic release function is something that really, I believe, needs to be in place, because you need to have an automatic way for you to just clean up all the reservations that are unnecessary, including the ones where you have a recurring meeting every Wednesday at 9 a.m. And sometimes the team is in the office and they need the room, and sometimes they're remote and they actually don't need the room, but they still want to have their meeting. That's really important. Then number 3 is the right-sized room approach, right? Preventing smaller groups of people from booking big rooms to ensure spaces fit actual needs is really important. Of course, here you could go with a very soft policy where you could simply continuously educate your staff on the fact that they always are recommended to select a room that fits the required capacity, so they're not booking bigger rooms just because they like the atmosphere in that room, but they're actually booking room fit for purpose, but also fit for for the number of people that are expected to meet in that space. And then the last item is the peak hour policy. So we've talked a lot about this, how room management is changing during busy times where you might want to enforce stricter booking rules. This is important. This is a big problem that we're seeing recently. There are peak hours that completely change the dynamics at the workplace. It might be Monday for you, it might be Friday for some other companies. It really doesn't matter. What matters is for you to understand when those peak hours happen and what sort of challenges do you need to address during those peak hours that you typically don't need to address during the, let's say, low occupancy days. Because the dynamics are completely different. So those are really the 4 elements that you could explore and start resolving today so that you're ready for 2025, so that, you can complete the meeting room audit by yourself or talk to us and we'll advise and help you go through that. In any case, the main goal really was for you to be equipped with some resources, some ideas, some strategies that you can discuss internally and really find the best fit for your company's needs. And by that, let's move to the Q&A part. That was, in short, the content that we've prepared for you today. So I will look at the chat. I will look at the Q&A very briefly just to see what are the questions that we need to respond. So just give me a second. Okay, there's one question. How do you, in a practical way, release a room that is booked but no one attended? Oh, that's actually a really interesting question. So there's many ways on how you can achieve that. One option that I typically would recommend is using a meeting room scheduler. So this means a physical tablet in front of the space that syncs up with your room calendar and allows you to visualize the reservations in front of the space so that everyone knows who booked the room, during which time, and understands whether the room is booked already or not, so that they also have the option to do ad hoc bookings. But for all the pre-booked meetings that are booked, typically the meeting room scheduler tablet or device would also allow you to automatically release the room that is not used, whether that's through a sensor or through a check-in confirmation. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what the how the utilization rates and how the reservations get checked with actual room usage levels, right? So that you ensure that if the room is booked, that the room is also used. That's the end goal. How long? The second question, how long does it take to do the audit? Yeah, that's a very good question. It really depends on the scope that we would define at the start. And typically, the audit requires the audit as such would be, let's say, a preliminary review of the current status of your offices, and that would be aligned with your, let's say, end goal, right? So it also depends on what your end goal actually is, on the number of rooms that you have, number of locations, types of spaces, and the level of, meeting room management strategies that are already in place at your company, because it could be that you're just missing one or two elements that you reach that pro level, or you're completely at the beginner phase and you need to start setting everything up from scratch. So it will mainly depend on, where do we start and where do we go, if I explain that in a very short form. But typically a basic audit should be completed within, half to 1 hour call. This third question, we're planning to redesign and change our meeting room setup, and we're curious, how would you calculate the number of meeting rooms needed for the new offices? Oh, that's a very smart question. Here, I would need a bit more details from you to be able to give you a more concrete response. There's also calculations that we would be able to use to calculate the projections. But mainly this depends on the industry that you're in. Typically, any company that has hybrid work does collaborates with remote teams, has a large sales team or a large marketing team working on projects, then this would impact the number of rooms that you need. Of course, it also depends on how proficient are you with the workplace strategies that you're deploying, whether you require some sort of basic setup or a more advanced model. A more advanced model would mean, hey, we have a very modern office. We don't have really pretty much limitations when it comes to the size of the space, because we really want to design something that is optimum for our business, which also means that we will, I don't know, split our offices into quiet zones, into collaborative spaces, and we'll also give our employees the option to do focus work in a one-person office pod, and we want to have, I don't know, 10, 20 of them. Then that, of course, impacts the total projections. But in general, what we would typically see that for every 15 or 25 employees, you need a minimum of one meeting room. That's the minimum requirement. And then the industry plays a big role here. Like, for example, legal firms would typically require much more meeting rooms than a construction company. Just to give you a very, very raw example, let's say. And the final question would be, which element of the audit is absolutely mandatory? Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So in my opinion, the mandatory part would be the people, spaces, and technology, the digital tools, and the feedback loop. So those three are really basic. You need to have a very good understanding of them, which basically at the end means that you know what your employees need, you understand the spaces that are available to them, and you're able to train them to effectively use digital tools so that you prevent things like, double bookings, meeting interruptions, rooms being booked and not used, and you have a way to continuously monitor that through the feedback loop that you establish, right? Because at the end of the day, really the ultimate goal, of course, is for you to optimize the costs, optimize productivity, but also that you ensure that, you know, the spaces that you have are easily accessible, are properly used, and there's no real friction when it comes to accessing those spaces. Just to give you a very concrete example, I'll never forget the scenario I had in many years back when we were conducting a job interview and were interrupted during that session. That's the most awkward thing that can happen for you. So that's something that you really want to avoid, because as an employee, you leave a bad impression of the company. You don't feel really well because of the awkward situation that you're not able to explain, and overall it also has a big impact on the morale as such, because we are all trying our best to do the best work possible, and we need to have the appropriate tools and resources to be able to do that on a very dynamic ad hoc way. That's the ultimate goal. Happy employees, great company, and meeting rooms all play a role together. Okay, good. Thank you so much for your questions. Let me just see if there are any additional questions available in the chat. Just quickly going through that. Okay, I see some of those. Okay, so yeah, I mean, if you want to agree for an audit, if you want to further review this, then please do drop us a quick email to cs@getjohn.com with the subject Meeting Room Audit 2025. Please use the subject mentioned here, because that automatically distributes your email to the right team. I'll be personally reviewing the request that we'll receive. And as I said, we're only accepting a limited number of companies right now because we're trying to best prepare you for 2025. So this is something that we'll need to do in a very effective, practical way, so that you have all the tools necessary for you to really start a new year with the best possible strategy and tools available out there. Okay, this is now the end of our session. I would really want to thank you for your time, for your attention. It's been wonderful having you live today on this call. And of course, I wish you all a joyful and festive December season. And I hope to speak with you one-on-one very soon. Thank you so much and have a good day. Goodbye.